Thank you very much for joining us again for the second edition of our new program, Navigating Nuances of Artificial Intelligence Implementation in Nations, here on Amogere Communications. I remain your host, Tolu Madara, saying thank you and welcome. Again, this is our new program, our new app program, Amogere Communications program, Navigating Nuances of Artificial Implementation in Nations. I remain your host, Tolu Omadara, saying welcome. Have you been? It's a joy, it's a pleasure, it's a privilege to welcome you to this second edition. And honestly, the conversation only gets more and more interesting. So, as we always do on ARC, as I always do on my ARC programs, I'm going to try to do a quick recap of some of the highlights of the first episode. So in the first episode, we established the fact that we're laying a foundation for subsequent episodes, right? And one of the things we emphasize is the fact that artificial intelligence is an emerging phenomenon, right? Artificial intelligence is an emerging phenomenon. And so it definitely comes with a lot of complexities because there are not yet any established templates, right? Even if the templates have been, created, they have not yet been institutionalized because to a large extent, they are still being tested. That is the nature of innovation, right? It could be the challenge of innovation, but like we said last week, it is also the promise of innovation, right? Innovation comes with possibilities. Innovation comes with uncertainties, but within that certainty is the promise of possibilities, right? Because possibility is about newness. The innovation is about doing what we've not done before, and to do what we've not done before, we are going to explore certain things that we have yet to navigate, right? And hence the need to have some dexterity in navigating these uncertainties. Now, one of the things we also said is that nations have had to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea with respect to, for instance, data centers. Data centers, if you know, they are usually very huge because they contain a lot of information, high value, high volume, high velocity data that the machines subject to natural language processing from where they pick patterns and from where they can, preempt for you to get a human being to be a machine, to behave like a human being. The machine definitely has to process huge amounts of information. And the process of doing that, they consume a lot of electricity. Now, these has led, honestly, to some animosity, right, from the everyday man who has had to share the cost, but not necessarily the benefits of artificial intelligence. The rising stock prices have not necessarily impacted the everyday man. So the everyday man in a number of nations is saying, I cannot bear the cost of the high energy consumption of data centers. And so this has led to a lot of kickbacks in many nations. Like we always say, if you are yet to subscribe to Amogere Communications, please do so. There is a lot of information for you to learn from and gain from, and you can catch up on some of these preceding thoughts, right? Now, today we are going to be going on to something slightly different. Today we want to look at artificial intelligence in defense, artificial intelligence in national defense. Before we do that, let me remind us of a quote we referenced last week, and that's a quote by the UN Secretary General, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He said that it was important to ensure that artificial intelligence, in fact, to use his words exactly, it is very important to ensure that artificial intelligence serves humanity and not the other way around. I'm going to say that again. He said it is very important to ensure that artificial intelligence serves humanity and not the other way around. So this is one thought that we are going to sort of dwell upon as we begin to explore this week's episode, artificial intelligence in defense, artificial intelligence in national defense. Remember last week we had said that one of the things that every nation needs to do as it navigates the nuances of implementing artificial intelligence is to gain clarity of vision and clarity of policy. What exactly do we want to achieve with artificial intelligence in our nation? One thing I needed to know is that artificial intelligence is like strategy. it is only there to enable your vision. Artificial intelligence, like we always say of technology, if you have not listened to some of our previous programs, please, like I said, subscribe to Amoge Radio Communications and look at some of the things we've said. We've talked about developing national innovation policies. We had a whole quarter where we looked at, how do you develop innovation policies? How do you also ensure that we turn innovation into something that enables economic development, right? We talked about ensuring that you have absorptive capacity for your national innovation policy. Absorptive capacity there is what enables you translate innovation into economic growth. This is important because it's not strategy for the sake of strategy. Similarly, it's not artificial intelligence for the sake of it's artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence should be serving a national goal, a national economic goal, and you cannot have economic growth in the absence of security, right? So it's really important for nations to begin to ask the question, what is our defense policy? What is our defense strategy? And given the fact that artificial intelligence is playing a very real role in defense today, national defense today, military wars, it's important for us to begin to articulate exactly how we want to use artificial intelligence to strengthen our defense as a nation, right? Now, this is not going to be divorced from your military capabilities, but it can amplify your military capabilities, right? The reason I'm saying this is because traditional wars have changed very significantly, right? The way wars used to be have changed significantly since the advent of artificial intelligence. I'll give you just two examples, right? Let's look at the example of Iran, the recent Iran war that was fought and is still being fought in a sense, right? In this war, for instance, we had high-value technology that was being released from places like the United States, and they were being met with significantly less expensive defense architecture enabled by technology. So, for instance, recently it was said, and I'm talking about just about a few days ago, within the last 1 week, it's been said that part of the reason why the United States is pausing on its strikes against Iran is because it's exhausted a significant or depleted a significant amount of defense architecture that's highly expensive. And all Iran has had to do is to respond with significantly less expensive defense technology, powered very much by artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, to be honest with you, is changing the nuances of national defense in nations. It's similar to what I was sharing last week about the introduction of open-ended technology. A number of organizations have, put their bets on artificial intelligence being a closed-ended technology. In other words, people are going to have to pay a closed source technology. People are going to have to pay. It will be open source. And then here comes the new player from China, all of a sudden, saying we are going to do open source. And what happens to organizations, technology organizations, tech organizations, tech companies that have placed their bets on artificial intelligence being a closed source technology, right? Now, the truth is that what is happening right now is that the stocks of a number of those tech companies have gone down significantly. Organizations like Microsoft and their leadership are being challenged right now, and it's not just Microsoft, it's also Meta, the owner of Facebook. A number of those organizations that have placed their bets on AI being a closed source technology are being shaken, and the market is responding to that nuance. Now, I'm not looking at the impact of it on those private sector organizations. All I'm drawing from that reference is the high level of uncertainty that surrounds artificial intelligence as it happens with any emerging technology. That's a fact. We laid that foundation last week, and we're still building on that foundation. So this high level of uncertainty, one of the things it does is that it brings a significant level of disruption. It brings gargantuan disruption, and it has done so also to the defense space, right? Because certain technologies, certain defense technologies were acquired at very expensive rates because of the technology that was prevalent at that time. But in just 4 years of penetrating the market, artificial intelligence has changed even defense space, such that You may have acquired a technology at maybe 10 times the amount for which people can now, other nations can now more or less like defend themselves against that technology. So in that kind of scenario, you have to re-strategize. I'm sure you know, and if you don't, please note that the word strategy is very military in its foundations, right? When you hear the word strategy, usually it has a lot to do with military, it has a lot to do with war, it has a lot to do with army, right? It has a lot to do with navy and so on and so forth, right? So for you, there's probably no way we need to re-strategize a nation more than in defense when it comes to artificial intelligence at the national level. Artificial intelligence has significantly changed the nature of wars. Nations are defending themselves for a tiny fraction of the cost that other nations may have incurred in, acquiring the architecture with which they are attacking such nations. So the nature of war has changed. Artificial intelligence has changed the nature of war significantly in the last 4 years, and the Iran war is probably just like currently the crescendo. It didn't start with the Iran war. Let's go back to Ukraine. I don't know if you've been following the Ukraine war. 4 years ago, it was almost like Ukraine was, crying out for help at every single instance. Europe was supporting, the then American administration was supporting. But guess what? Ukraine innovated, Ukraine learned, Ukraine built, and they had a particular general who really helped them to develop the kind of drones and the kind of artificial intelligence technology that was very responsive to the attacking infrastructure of Russia. Right now, that has changed the face of the war. That has changed the nature of the war. The war that Russia strategized for 4 years ago is very different from the war that Russia is fighting 4 years after. That has been the impact of artificial intelligence on defense in nations. So Russia is fighting a very different war from the war that it began. Significantly different, and that has been the impact of artificial intelligence. So when you hear people like the United Nations Secretary General say that artificial intelligence is very powerful, and because of its ability to impact nations in a very significant manner, it's important to ensure that artificial intelligence serves man and not the other way around. They know what they are saying. They have seen the impact of artificial intelligence on global realities. Coming back to Africa, I'm sure you've heard about what happened when America was able to strike some targets in Nigeria last December. They didn't necessarily do that physically. They did that a lot through artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've also heard, and if you haven't, about how through artificial intelligence, America was able to pinpoint the exact location of the late Iran leader. But you probably also heard that he also allowed himself to be chosen. So it wasn't like they weren't seen through technology that they were being located or that he was being located, but for some reason he also, at that age felt, okay, I'm going to give up my life, and then I'm sure about the readiness of my people to respond after I'm taken. So he died. America was able to strike him, but what America probably did not bargain for was the ability of Iran to respond, technologically in a very military manner. Well, my name is Tutu Lomodara here on Abogo Radio Communications. This is our program, your program, Navigating the Nuances of Artificial Implementation in Nations. And today we are looking at artificial intelligence in national defense. Very, very, very important. Is your nation responding to the changing nature of 21st century wars post-artificial intelligence deployment? I'll be right back. Welcome back to your program, Navigating Nuances of Artificial Intelligence in Nations on Abogo Radio Communications. I remain your host, Tolomodara, and this is our episode exploring artificial intelligence in national defense. So, I want to bring in two dimensions that can enable implementation, because it's not enough to pinpoint a reality. We also have to begin to propose or recommend possible ways around it. So the reality currently is that artificial intelligence has changed the nature of wars. We've seen it in Iran, we've seen it in Ukraine, right? The question is exactly how do nations position themselves? You have said, okay, Tolu, we've heard you, you've made a point, we agree, but how do we, empower ourselves as nations? Well, to be honest with you, it begins a lot with education. And the reason I'm saying this is because you have to empower yourself to match innovation with innovation. I said this last week and I'm still saying it, that sometimes the way to navigate the challenges of innovation is to use more innovation, right? So when you see what Ukraine did in the Russia-Ukraine war, they didn't do it with any existing technology. What they did was to, respond by re-innovating. Because one of the things you have to understand in war is that surprise itself is an element of attack. So sometimes when you're using known technologies, the enemy can plan for you, right? The enemy can plan effectively because you are using a known technology. But when you introduce a new technology that the enemy is yet to discover, that further empowers you. So Russia did not, Ukraine did not match Russia by using existing technology. Part of what Ukraine did was to create new technologies or to adapt existing technology, to recreate existing technology in a manner that Russia had to first spend time figuring out, and that time was an advantage in war. So you have to begin to educate for innovation. Nations have to be very intentional. Remember what we said last week, clarity of policy, right? Nations have to be very intentional in creating policies that is going to empower them innovation-wise. And this has a lot to do with innovations. When you see nations creating centers for artificial intelligence in defense, they know what they're doing. And I'm not saying this exists. I'm saying these are the kind of things that should exist. And I won't be surprised that it exists already in some form. Now, some nations are also going the way of partnerships, right? They're saying, okay, much as we want to establish new centers in the public sector, we also want to partner with existing firms that already have these technologies and ensure that we now use those technologies in a way that suits our military purposes, right? Of course, America tends to do this, but again, in some nations, some players in the private sector are responding against this. For instance, recently, a Google DeepMind researcher said he was going to resign over his company's work with the Defense Department, right? So his name is Alex Turner. He's a research scientist, and he had worked for more than 2 years on artificial intelligence safety in Google DeepMind. But when he saw that Google signed an agreement to let Pentagon use their artificial intelligence for classified operations, he decided to resign. Classified means that it's under the radar. Classified means that it can be such that will be very questionable in terms of its morality, but they are going to peg it under the phrase national security. So classified simply gives them an open check to do anything anywhere. And for him, that was questionable for its own morality. Now,
at Armor Gates Training, we believe professional development should do more than inform. It should transform how people work, lead, and deliver results. That's why we support organizations through conceptual insight, practical learning, and performance evaluation right at the intersection of leadership, strategy, and institutional transformation. Our approach focuses on practical learning format that professionals can immediately apply in their workplace. At Armor Gate, we don't teach theory alone. We equip participants with real-world insight drawn from almost 2 decades of organizational transformation experience. Our programs combine multiple learning methods designed for real-time measurable results. Through seminars, we facilitate deep conversation on key subjects. Using group exercises, participants collaborate, reflect, and think strategically. With case studies, they then sharpened analytical and decision-making skills using real industry scenarios. Through relevant videos, we spark insightful discussions using relatable real-life context. All in all, every participant develops an individual work plan, ensuring the learning turns into real action after the program. Our training programs are hosted in world-class venues across global cities, including Addis Ababa, Nairobi, Mombasa, Cape Town, Dubai, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, London, Florida, and Washington, D.C. Let's work with you to turn learning into your organization's growth. For more inquiries, call +234 807 9574 151 or WhatsApp +1 610 504 6026. Visit www.thearmorgate.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Armorgate. Armorgate Training, transforming knowledge, interaction, and growth.
Now, I wish I could say that it was only Alex Turner that chose to resign from Google because of this. No, but he wasn't the only one. A number of workers have also been said to have resigned from Google since, especially their deep their artificial intelligence and their deep mind segment. A number of workers have been said to resign since Google signed this partnership, this agreement with Pentagon. Now, that could be one of the fallouts of nations partnering or choosing the way of partnership with private sector, right? The private sector, especially in nations where there's freedom of speech and freedom of expression and so on and so forth, and they have strong institutions. Well, this may lead to some kind of reactions from players in the private sector, right? I don't know if you have also heard about, and I've referenced this in previous programs. You've heard about the conflicts between, I think it was the White House, and I think it was OpenAI, if I'm not wrong, or it was Anthropic that had that conflict with the White House, because the White House wanted to deploy artificial intelligence in a manner that they felt was in conflict with their values. So in nations where you have strong freedom of speech, freedom of partnership, and we have strong institutions like the judiciary, in such nations, there could be a kickback from the private sector if they feel that you're about to deploy their technology in a manner that is not enabling of humanity, right? And so I think that nations generally should focus more on growing more innovation capacity from a public sector point of view. That's my own take. Much as there's the option of partnering with the private sector, some their technology in a manner that is not enabling of humanity, right? And so I think that nations generally should focus more on growing more innovation capacity from a public sector point of view. That's my own take. Much as there's the option of partnering with the private sector, some private sector organizations may decide not to allow their technology to be utilized in a way that you think is appropriate for national defense, and if institutions are strong in the nation, the courts, for instance, may side with such organizations. On the other hand, or in addition to that, even for private sector organizations that are technology will be utilized in a way that you think is appropriate for national defense, and if institutions are strong in the nation, the courts, for instance, may side with such organizations. On the other hand, or in addition to that, even for private sector organizations that agree to work with the government to lend their technology for defense purposes, some members, some key experts in those organizations may choose to resign, as Alex Turner did, to say, you know what, I don't agree with what my organization wants to do with artificial intelligence, and so I'm going to excuse myself. So I much as the way of partnership is one possibility, I still believe more in nations doing a lot of education for innovation and developing centers for technology in defense, centers for artificial intelligence in military with Pentagon. Now, that could be one of the fallouts of nations partnering or choosing the way of partnership with private sector, right? The private sector, especially in nations where there's freedom of speech and freedom of expression and so on and so forth, and they have strong institutions, well, this may lead to some kind of reactions from players in the private sector, right? I don't know if you have also heard about, and I've referenced this in previous programs, you've heard about where beneficial do partnerships, that's what I think, amongst themselves, nation-to-nation partnerships, right? I think that the European Union, for instance, has been relatively strong in this. NATO used to be strong in this before President Trump came and shook the NATO alliance a bit, that North American treaty. But I think a continent like Africa also needs to think about this, right? Last week, I referenced what the Minister of Communications, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Osun Tijani, has been doing in Nigeria, right? And they've been doing well in terms of the economy. But I think that it's important to also, work with the defense, right? The Ministry of Defense, to look at how they can deploy technology to strengthen Nigeria's defense, right? So the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy, Osun Tijani is the Federal Minister of Communications and Digital Economy of Nigeria, right? This Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy. He's been doing this since 2013. And in that period, Nigeria, like I said last week, had leaped in terms of something like its GIRI rating, right? GIRI means the global index, right? That more or less like measures artificial intelligence based on inclusion and diversity, labor and skills, AI in public service, trust and safety, and of course ethics and sustainability. So Nigeria leaped, I think, about 42 places under his leadership, and so definitely Nigeria has been doing something well in these dimensions, right? But they also need to think about how they can, one, use this more to strengthen Nigeria's military, to strengthen Nigeria's technology, defense technology, strengthen Nigeria's intentional deployment of technology to strengthen defense, and then to also lead regional partnerships for this, right? And that's just an example. So I think another thing that nations can do, in addition to building their own innovation capacity, specifically for defense, strengthening their ability to use artificial intelligence for defense, they can also, build international, intra-regional private sector deployment of it, like I said, is a way out, but I'm not sure how dependable that could always be, right? Especially when we have strong institutions, and we should have strong institutions. So I think that the public sector should work more on growing its own capacity to match innovation with innovation in all. I think one last thing I'm going to say, and we're going to bring it to a close for today, is that we also have to ensure that a lot of reviews is going on, a lot of study is going on, because this is naturally part of what happens when we are doing studies, when we are growing capacity, when we are establishing centers. But I think that we also should intentionally have grants and funds that we deploy to centers in universities that are devoted to this, to study what is currently going on. In other words, you don't have to be in a war to learn from the war, right? There should be centers, especially, like I said, centers of technology defense, or defense technology, however you choose to coin it. There should be centers that are, doing a thorough study of what went on in the Ukraine-Russia war. At what point did it turn? What percentage of the change can be attributed to technology generally and artificial intelligence specifically, right? Such centers should also be studying what went on in Russia, in Iran, right? It's been about 6 months of war in Iran thus far, right? What role did artificial intelligence play in that? And what can be done from the lessons to strengthen your own base as a nation before war comes? Because the best time to prepare for war is before it. Well, in closing, I need to mention one or two things that are currently happening, because artificial intelligence itself is also being used as a weapon of attack. Not just as a weapon of attack, but in terms of being the recipient of the attack. It's being used as something to attack nations with, right? Because one thing that nations have seen at war is that if they attack your data centers, for instance, that can minimize your capacity to hit back at them. So in the ongoing war, for instance, the ongoing Iran war, part of what is happening is that Iran is now attacking Americans' data centers in places like UAE, that's United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, right? So this has impacted artificial intelligence generally as an economy, and is probably part of what is affecting the stocks of these technology firms. Because right now, Iran understands that, look, it's strategic for me to just hit the database centers of the data centers of American companies that are in places like the UAE, right? Especially the nations that are supporting the United States, right? So right now, what has been observed thus far is that the data centers that used to be a point of attraction, because previously nations like the United Arab Emirates used to be able to attract American companies with their very stable electricity generated by the large petrochemical, strengths that they had. So they used to be able to attract American companies, American technological giants who are trying to strengthen their AI offerings, right? So they used to be able to attract them to places like the UAE with what they had, right? The energy, the petrochemical reserves, and so on and so forth. But that may be changing, because right now, AI data centers are now a new class of, they're now like strategic targets. I told you that war is itself is strategy. Anytime you hear war, you're thinking strategy. So what nations like Iran have done is to turn those data centers themselves into strategic targets, because if they can hit the data centers, then they can hit the ability of a nation like America to organize itself as efficiently in places like the Middle East. So the AI-driven data centers that had been more or less like enabling war in the Middle East is now a strategic target, or are now a strategic targets, right? Because now we have a lot of digital, what you call mega campuses in places like UAE, AI-driven data centers that had been, more or less like enabling war in the Middle East is now a strategic target, or are now a strategic targets, right? Because now we have a lot of digital, what you call mega campuses in places like UAE, Bahrain, and there's been an expansion of these new data center hubs, right? And these new data center hubs, like I said, can empower or strengthen the war the United States is fighting against Iran. So Iran has just considered it strategic to simply hit those data centers, right? And now that is happening, two things have occurred, right? Naturally, the ability of places like UAE and Bahrain to attract more American tech companies to build data centers in the Middle East may definitely be challenged. It may currently be going through some kind of re-evaluation, right? What does that mean for UAE? What does that mean for Bahrain? First of all, economically, and then what does that also mean for the United States, also militarily, right? Because it's the Middle East we're talking about here. What does that mean for the United States militarily if those data centers can be, attacked by a nation like Iran? Will they still be able to coordinate technologically as strongly as before if those data centers and those digital mega campuses have become the object of targets? Wow, I think this is a good place to stop. We've asked enough questions, and we've also tried to propose some solutions. Strengthen your innovation capacity. Innovation is usually the answer to many of the problems generated by innovation. Many of the problems generated by innovation is usually more innovation, right? because right now, I'll throw one thing there as we close. Right now, the data centers have become the object of attack, right? And you may say, oh, that has created a problem. But is there another way we can bypass digital mega campuses? Is there another way that we can innovate to ensure that we don't have to over-concentrate data centers? I think so. I really, really think so. And I think that some innovation may be in the process already in terms of introducing the kind of chips that can do more with less, thereby reducing the amount for huge spaces that can then become high-value targets in war. So again, the answer to the problems created by innovation remains more innovation, in my opinion. Well, I hope this has been an enriching conversation for you, especially if you're a policymaker. Remember, if you're listening to me in Amogate, we are always ready to partner with you, to work with you. These are things that we can turn into policies and into processes. We can help you set up your national innovation centers, especially the ones that will be directed that strengthen your military. We are ready to help you build the capacity, the education for innovation capacity. We are also ready to work with you to support you in establishing the centers that can understudy ongoing wars to see the lessons that can be learned to strengthen your military base. And by the way, let me also say that Amogate is in partnership with Lagos State University, LASU Consult. So we also are able to work with your universities, to partner with your universities to develop these centers, to develop these innovation hubs that would strengthen you militarily. Because like I said, the 21st century war has changed significantly, and significantly more so in the last, or intensely more so in the last 4 years since artificial intelligence became more of a phenomenon. So you also have to strengthen your military base, you have to strengthen your defense technology to anticipate those changes and respond appropriately. Wow, this is where we're going to enjoy cutting on today's edition of Navigating Nuances of Artificial Intelligence in Nations. It's been very interesting doing this with you, very enriching and very exciting. I look forward to being back with you, same time, same station next week. Until then, remember, you cannot fight new wars in old ways. Thank you very much and have a good one.
Amogate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Amogate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@theamogate.org or call +234 810 999 6666, +234 807 957 4151, and +161 0504 6026. www.theamogate.org. Amogate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.